I think what we also learned is how close we get with the parents. Um, so in this setting, which doesn't happen in a bricks and mortar school, I'm in your house right now, right? I don't know who's around the screen listening to me talk. And a grade 4 girl or boy, they're on screen, but mom and dad are probably close by listening to every word a teacher's saying, right? So I think teachers have learned that you have to be pretty precise with their words. Be courageous. You have to be pretty courageous as an online teacher because you don't really know who's listening on the other end. So you got to be precise, accurate, and it's easy to make mistakes. And sometimes those are public mistakes, right? And different than a bricks and mortar school. So I think they've learned just to be really smart and focus on the things that matter with kids.
For many, the idea of remote learning during COVID-19 is not something that people look back on with fondness. It was, for the most part, an emergency response, and people were very critical of how it played out. And whether that's accurate or true or not, it certainly is how people viewed that. However, somebody like Andy Mead, who is the principal of the remote school in Manitoba, really sort of personified a very different approach. And Andy and his team worked diligently to create a real sense of community and excellent learning. I know so many of the teachers at that school who were representing hundreds of kids across Manitoba, and it really provided an outstanding learning experience. It is unfortunate you don't hear that on the broadcast, on the conversation, that they are no longer pursuing it in the same way, and that's really unfortunate. And it's also interesting, at the same time, Saskatchewan, my home province, is actually launching distance learning school. So very, very curious to see how this idea plays across Canada and the rest of the world. One thing is for sure: remote learning is not going away, and we will get better at it. And again, I applaud Andy and his team for the great work they've done. And I would encourage anyone involved in remote and distance learning to reach out to Andy and get more information around the kinds of things that they did. It was just fantastic. Again, this episode is brought to you by Advanced Learning Partnerships. We work with school districts all across and communities all across North America, providing outstanding professional learning, and we'd love to be able to participate and support you in that. And so always feel free to reach out. Either way, hit that subscribe button. Do that if you would. That'd be great, and help us out in getting some more viewership. We've got some great conversations. This is actually, ironically, the very first conversation that I recorded in this series, and yet it's being launched here as episode 7. So that's just the way that goes sometimes. And Andy is the third person from Manitoba that I've interviewed. And if you listen to the first episode, the end of the first episode, and the end of this episode, you'll find an interesting parallel there. But anyway, long introduction. That's okay. Hope you enjoy my conversation with Andy Mead. So, Andy, tell me just a little bit about your journey into remote learning, sort of where it started, and kind of from the beginning to where you are right now.
For sure. So I guess it was March, or not March, late December, when COVID was sort of getting quite big. I was a principal in Hanover School Division, sort of southeast Manitoba. That division was sort of put on a remote setting sooner than all the rest of the province, just because the COVID numbers in that part of Manitoba were quite high. So we went in that emergency remote learning for a few weeks, and then the whole province went there. I guess that was March or so, 2020, whatever these were. And then COVID didn't go away, and then I got wind of this Manitoba Remote Learning Support Center that the province was creating to support kids from grades 1, kindergarten to grade 8 in remote setting. And I didn't hate the remote learning that we were doing in my school at Mitchell. Like, I think the staff did a really great job, and I think we set up a system that worked pretty well, all things considered. So I took a chance and took a run at this job, and fooled some people at an interview, and they gave me this position to be the principal of the Manitoba Remote Learning Sports Center, and that started in January of 2021. Supposed to be about a 6 month job, and see how COVID went, and 2.5 years later, here we are continuing on. So it started off with lots and lots of kids, but it's definitely gotten a little smaller as more kids have gone back to school, which is a great thing. And but we're serving kids that can't go to school for a number of reasons.
So your total numbers in Manitoba are what?
Right now in the remote learning sports center, we have 190 kids or so, give or take a couple, in the remote learning sports center.
Now, and as we talked about before, that number's certainly different from the nearly 1,000 kids that you were supporting
Right.
back when. Do you feel like you've hit a sweet spot in terms of like, I think we have the right, because I know before, again, and this is a conversation that you and I have had previously about the fact that I think Manitoba requires that the student has some sort of a reason why, a medical
Yeah,
reason why they can't attend school.
that's right.
And a lot of the conversations that were happening previous to that was that there were just some kids who thrived working
Right.
remotely. But given those constraints or whatever, do you feel like let's say 200 is the right number for a province of 1 million people to be offering remote learning?
Yeah, hard for me to say that, but I think the more like if for one teacher, a sweet number is like 20 kids, right? So in a remote setting, it's a small number in a sort of a typical classroom. I think it's kind of a right number, to be honest. But in a remote setting, just for screen requirements and space on the screen to have 20 kids in your class. So right now I've got 8 teachers, 8 classroom teachers. We actually have about 25 kids per class, and I think that's a little too big to really effectively support every kid. So, I mean, if I had 16 teachers times by 20, but right now it's sort of what we've learned since the start of the year. We had about 250 kids registered at the start. Many of those kids went back to school. We dropped about 160. Lots of those kids came back because they just couldn't manage it, or health or whatever came up again. So yeah, we've been sort of floating around 170, 180 for the entire year so far. So I think that's probably a pretty good number.
So what's the typical day look like for a remote teacher and learner? Is it essentially a mirrored experience from
Not
a regular
at
classroom, or
all.
does it look different? Okay, not at
Hundred
all. What
percent.
does it look like?
Yeah, like and so just the process in which we onboard kids into our program. The first thing I do as the principal is I'll meet with the parent and the principal to talk about this exact thing. What does a remote learning setting look like? Because we purposely don't mirror what we do in schools because we don't want kids on a screen from 9 in the morning till 4 o'clock at night. So we have some time parameters that we put for the younger kids. It's about an hour, an hour and a half a day of screen time with the teacher. And the older kids, it's about an hour and a half to 2 hours per day for screen time. So a typical day, first thing in the morning, 9:15 to 10 o'clock is a class meeting, just like we're doing here. One teacher, all the kids in a class meeting. And the class itself would look like a typical class that you'd see, like start with welcomes, you'd start with a sort of a sponge activity to get the kids going, some direct instruction, lots of communication, lots of community building is our biggest focus to make sure kids feel a part of a school, part of a thing, because these kids are scattered all around our province. Sitting at your house by yourself, you're not feeling like you're part of something. So we put a lot of emphasis on making kids feel a part of this community. And because of that, we probably spend less time on the academic stuff. Um, we can't recreate what a school does. We focus on 4 subjects: math, ELA, science, and social studies. And we're not going to go into as many of the concepts in those courses, but the ones that we target, we're really going to get deep into. So it's certainly not the same. And then, so a typical day, start with that group class, and then the rest of the day is one-on-one meetings with kids, short, small group meetings with kids. We also offer a fitness class and a music class. We don't assess those classes, but it's just a chance for kids to be social, meet some new kids, meet another teacher, be a part of a community, have some fun in a different way online. And the afternoon's kind of repeat of the process. We have a start with a group meeting, and then after the group meeting, it's one-on-one time, small group meeting time, and independent learning time.
For teachers, for your current staff, are most of them ones that have been doing this now for several years, or are they brand new to it?
No, every step. The only New teacher we have this year is Darren Kura. Well, actually, last year he joined us. Darren Kurapatwa. Everyone else has been with us since the start, since January 21. So
And I mean, I know I'm assuming that most of them had little or zero experience doing any kind of remote learning or teaching before that.
zero,
So
yeah.
how like how would you describe their their learning curve, and like what is it that they know now and have kind of come to say, like, yeah, I understand how this is teaching. Like, here's some stuff that we know are the same, it doesn't matter the platform, and here's the kind of things I'm learning that, like, yeah, you have to treat this differently.
Yeah, I think you're right. January 21, I think no one had any experience. So we spent the first 2 weeks with a bunch of coaches from around the province to get these folks up to speed. Some of the technology, like we had some teachers that, what's this black thing on my desk that looks like a rectangle? Well, that's your computer. You need that to do this remote learning stuff. So we started some pretty basic, pretty basic steps to start with a lot of our staff. But what they've learned, and I love it because it's the focus on the kid. Like, what can we do for that kid to engage? And it's all about that sense of community and bringing every kid in. And I think what we also learned is how close we get with the parents. Um, so in this setting, which doesn't happen in a bricks and mortar school, I'm in your house right now, right? I don't know who's around the screen listening to me talk. And a grade 4 girl or boy, they're on screen, but mom and dad are probably close by listening to every word a teacher's saying, right? So I think teachers have learned that you have to be pretty precise with their words. Be courageous. You have to be pretty courageous as an online teacher because you don't really know who's listening on the other end. So you got to be precise, accurate, and it's easy to make mistakes. And sometimes those are public mistakes, right? And different than a bricks and mortar school. So I think they've learned just to be really smart and focus on the things that matter with kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea that they're spending a lot of time in one-on-one scenarios,
Mm-hmm.
that may not be like, and again, maybe that's my next question would be like, what are the advantages that you're seeing for students? And again, I don't just mean supporting kids who aren't able or have difficulty being in school, but that's the true advantages of a remote learning experience. Like, what are the pluses that says, like, yeah, this is what's really great about remote learning?
I think with a lot of our kids, I saw a great tweet a while ago. It's about kids need different dosages of school, and in this setting, I think we can provide a more of an individual program for kids. So, like, if a kid can't handle it being in a classroom from 9 a.m. till 4 p.m., that's a long day for some people. But they maybe can handle an hour of a synchronous class with a teacher and a 20-minute follow-up meeting after, and that's their day, right? So I think we can do that for some kids. We can meet them where they're at, and in a classroom setting in ours, because they're being supervised by the parents at home, there's less of that active supervision all day that we have to do. We can focus on teaching and learning more and relationship building.
So I think I want to give kudos to the province of Manitoba because, as far as I know, and people listening can correct me,
Hmm.
but I believe that Manitoba is the only province who has invested this at a provincial level. There's lots of individual districts that are offering virtual learning, and so that's not unique. But I think that there's something um, to be congratulated on, that the province has maintained this vision, and largely because of your efforts and to continue to lead that. But as schools think about, and I don't know if folks are thinking about expanding or rethinking their remote learning, like, what advice would you maybe give those who kind of want to pursue this sort of work? Like, what are the key things to think about?
You need people that just embrace change. Like, this thing changes on a dime every 20 minutes, it feels. So you have people that really focus on what matters in education. Like, it's all about the kid. And in as an administrator, it's been different for me. Like, I don't spend a ton of time with kids in this setting. I spend all my time with staff. So my biggest goal is to support teachers, right? So the teachers can do their job, and their job is to work with kids. So I think that mindset of it's just taking care of people is our biggest goal in this center. So having those people that have that heart and independent ability to work by themselves, to focus on helping kids get better, on not just the Pythagoras theorem. Like, we want kids to learn how to communicate, collaborate, to use digital tools in the right way and sort of focus on those bigger ideas. So I think so. So what do you need? Yeah, just those people that are flexible and have fun in tough settings and that kind of stuff.
Have you been able to identify any kind of leaders or people that you pay attention to outside of Manitoba? Like, are there some people that you say, yeah, we pay attention to this person's work and so forth? To be able to sort of compile some resources.
Yeah, Jenny Donahue put together sort of our framework. So, and it's brilliant. Like it's definitely something we rely on every day. Just our three principles that we focus on. So we spent a lot of time working on her ideas and her work. So I would recommend that if you're looking at a remote setting, get her involved in some way. She's really smart. Someone that I've recently got into in terms of just reading his work is Peter DeWitt.
Yeah.
Just the idea of de-implementation and getting rid of the noise and just focusing on the stuff that matters, and how to make positive change with people and programs and systems. I would say focus on those two from my point of view.
And so, what do you think the future of remote learning is? Like, where does it go? And I know you said like you don't know if this is going to be going next year. And again,
Right.
when it is comes down to provincial, like there's just a lot more volatility in terms of
Yeah.
changes of governments. We know that, but just in general, like the future of remote learning, what would you say it is
Yeah,
from your
I
perspective?
think there's always going to be a place for it. I think the best place for every kid is in a school, just for the social aspect, especially the younger guys. Grade 1 to 8, they learn, or kindergarten, grade 8, they learn so much that social stuff that we can't replicate in this setting. A lot of kids with anxiety and things like they can join the remote learning center to learn, but they're not learning uh, skills to manage their anxiety because there is no anxiety. We don't have hallways. You're not getting bumped in the hallway. You're not dealing with playground stuff. So they miss that. They miss those things when they're in our program. So, but I think there's always going to be a place because there's kids that just can't go to school for medical reasons. And being a principal of a school for a fairly long time now, you've got one kid who's needs a remote setting. How does a school manage that student? How do you pull that kid into the community and they can't ever be in the building? Like, how do you do that? Like, that's a really tough thing for a school to do. I think now that we're so much better, all this technology stuff across the board, I think it's easier now. But again, it's still a tough thing. So to have a remote learning where kids can join online and feel a community online, I think is sort of the nice thing about this remote learning. Where I don't think that's without that, it's going to be tough for some kids.
And my what about hybrid learning? This is something that I really have always
Boy,
thought is, boy, there's some really powerful potentials in that, and I completely understand the challenge of the logistics of how that could even work, and but allowing people to choose when and if, just like we're seeing in the workplace, where there's some places
right?
that if you want to work in person, you can, and in fact it's encouraged some days, but you get to choose that. I don't know if it's ever possible, or if there's any way in which we can expand this to make it more of a hybrid, so that people do experience both of these, of the advantages of both.
Yeah, I think there'd have to be lots of choice in that because remote learning isn't for everyone. There's a huge technical piece to remote learning. If you don't have a good strong Wi-Fi, if you don't have a good laptop or an iPad, it's impossible, right? So I think there's a place. I think teachers would probably want to run me out of the city if I said we could do this because I think that's a really hard thing for a teacher to do is to manage the hybrid in like. I remember back in COVID, we had teachers running between two classrooms trying to teach two classrooms at one time just to keep kids separate and spaced apart, and that was really hard. So I have to do a lot more thinking about how to make that work. But I love the idea, right? If the kids,
Yeah.
my kid is at home sick today, he's well enough to learn, but he's coughing, so we can't send him to school. But so how can we continue the learning for that kid for my kid? He's at home. How could he still be a part of that classroom? I think that's a neat idea, just to reduce some
Well,
missed learning.
and again, I think that the issue probably it comes down to the fact that it's really at this point a privileged kind of a scenario where
Yeah,
a child who's got parents at home that are willing to kind of support that may say, I'd like to actually work from home 3 days a week, but I still want to
right,
play volleyball and I want to be
right,
in the band program, so I'll come to school on Tuesdays and Fridays or whatever.
right.
Like,
Yeah,
and again, that to me is like the ideal setting, but again, I think it speaks to probably, a portion of the population, so who even has those choices at
Well,
hand.
yeah,
It
and
certainly is not a choice that all kids can even make if they'd like, even if they want to.
oh, for sure. And I was watching TV last night, and the bottom of the ticker tape on the, I think it was a feed from Minnesota, and there was some weather happening in Minnesota, maybe an inch of snow or something, where they shut schools down in some parts of the world. Um, and it was a remote learning day. It wasn't a snow day. It's now turned into a remote learning day. So I'm so curious about what that looks like. How many kids get engaged? What are the
Right,
teachers doing? Like, how do you actually pull these kids in on this random off day? All of a sudden,
right.
they're going from bricks and mortar to a remote learning day. What does that look like, and what's the engagement? I'm just fascinated by that because
Well, given the
I
fact
still
that
think that
you've invested what you have in getting there, like it seems like that's, I don't know if you can just pull that off, just the drop of the
yeah,
hat and make that
I don't
somehow
think so. Yeah,
effective. But
to take away the snow day is such a sad thing for kids.
yeah, but and again, as if only Americans and maybe British Columbians, I don't know, understand what a snow day actually is, because you and I in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, there's no such thing as snow days. You go to
No,
school, like
yeah, in the
okay,
city of Winnipeg for sure. The rural parts of Manitoba, they get the odd snow day if the roads are no good. But I've
right.
had the I've had a couple in my career, not very many.
Yeah. Well, hey, I love the conversation. I just want to finish. I got a few little rapid questions, and part of this is to help people kind of get some other insights on what part of the world you live in and kind of what you're
Yeah,
into. So I shared this with you, so I hope you got them handy here. So you got a book or a podcast or a TV series that you'd share?
TV series. We're just starting to watch Slow Horses, an Apple TV show. It's awesome. I highly recommend it if you can watch that show. It's lots of fun.
All right, I've seen it pass by, and I might put it on my list. Uh, what about a local underrated attraction or someplace for people to visit? If people think of Winnipeg, they think of the Human Rights Museum, which is amazing, but I wouldn't call
Yeah,
that underrated. What's an under the radar place that people should know about in your part of the world?
yeah. I don't know if it's underrated, but I would love to see more. Like, come here in winter, because if you go to the Forks, which is right by the Canadian Human Rights Museum, we have this winter skating trail. I took my kids down there the past weekend, and we skated for miles on the river, and it's just such a neat way to see the city and such a neat vibe down there. And I would, if you have a chance to get to Winnipeg in winter and skate our river, I would totally recommend it.
Well, it's got to compare well to the Rideau River in Ottawa, but
It's better. It's
again,
better.
people get a little scared of the Winnipeg weather, so you'd have to pick it. You'd have to pick your time to go there. But yeah, I love
Yeah.
the idea of embracing. And again, I'm talking to the expert here about embracing winter, who's got his kids outside curling and playing hockey, no matter the weather. So you've been a good model for that. Well, anyway, thank you, Andy, for your time today, and we continue to watch your efforts in remote learning, and congratulate you and Ted and the whole team on the good things you're doing with students in Manitoba.
I appreciate it, Dean. Thanks for chatting with me today, and I always appreciate your support because you're a big part of our program too here. Because you were one of the first people that spoke to our staff January 21 about remote learning and just learn what to focus on. So I'll never forget those chats you've had with our staff.
Well, appreciate it. Take good care.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.